Windows 10 is dead, leaving hundreds of thousands of old but perfectly functional PCs without an upgrade path. Including this, the Alienware Alpha, the OG Steam machine. And while intended to ship with SteamOS, originally it would ship with Windows 8.1 due to delays. When Valve eventually did launch SteamOS, the compatibility wasn't great and support was dropped pretty quickly. But now 10 years later, gaming on Linux is the best it's ever been, in no small part due to Proton. And as Windows 10 is dead, and Microsoft do not want me to install Windows 11 on this because apparently it is too old, it is now finally time to look at Linux as an alternative. But where to start? There's Bazzite, CachyOS, Chimera, Nobara, Regatta, Ubuntu Game Pack, Fedora Game Lab, and most likely many more. So I decided to download a few different distros, plopped them on a Ventoy, and I'm going to see if I can get any of them to work on this niche piece of hardware, which contains a NVIDIA 860M, and also NVIDIA's legendarily poor Linux support, especially for legacy drivers. So first up, Bazzite, and this is the GNOME variant with the NVIDIA legacy drivers. I much prefer GNOME over KDE. No offense to KDE, I just prefer GNOME. I've been using it for over 10 years on my laptop, and that's where I want to stay. Of course, feel free to choose any desktop environment you prefer, but for me, GNOME is always the way to go. So my go-to first test is always Shadow the Tomb Raider, because Shadow the Tomb Raider has a native Linux build, so we should see if there's any problems straight away without having to deal with anything to do with Proton or anything like that. And we get around 35 FPS on the lowest settings, which is comparable to the Windows version, which I've shown previously. The next game in my test suite is World War Z, and this is running through Proton GE 1019, I believe, and it is an absolute glitchy mess. It is running very poorly. I've tried this with the DirectX 11 version and also the Vulkan version. The Vulkan version runs really badly, or not at all, which is a shame. In comparison with the Windows version running on the same machine, I was getting 71 FPS on average with 4,244 frames rendered, so this is nowhere near and is basically unplayable. Next up, Borderlands 3, running at 1080p at 75% resolution scale and at the very lowest settings. Here we get an average of 42 FPS, which is pretty good to say this machine is 10 years old. Again, this is running via GE Proton version 1019. GE Proton is probably my favorite version of Proton. I will use it over everything if I can because it just seems to work on pretty much everything. So thank you very much, Glorious Eggroll, for providing us this. So other than canned benchmarks, I did test a few other games. Lonely Mountains Downhill I could not get to run no matter what version of Proton I chose. Maybe with some more tinkering I could get it to work, but this video is not about tinkering. I want this to be a straight out of the box experience, minimal setup, and just work for everyone. No Linux knowledge needed, and yeah, it doesn't work with Lonely Mountains Downhill, and I couldn't get Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy working either. So in better news, Strange Antiquities, which is a very recent game, works perfectly fine. Yes, it is an indie game, but remember this is a 10-year-old PC, and we're not going to be running the latest and greatest, so if you're just into indie games, then this is probably fine with you. So after a couple more failures, I decided to move on from Bazzite and try something else, and the next up is CachyOS, which is the latest one I've heard of, and again I have chosen the GNOME variant. So first up, once again, the native port of Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It is a match for Bazzite and in turn Windows. This is a great port, it's just so consistent across the board. It's always the first thing I check and used to. It's a shame that I've never completed it. Next up, World War Z, and unlike Bazzite, it actually runs pretty well. It runs at an average of 61 FPS on the lowest settings at 1080p. It is still 10 frames shy of the Windows version, which ran at 71 FPS, but if we have a quick comparison between the two Linux versions, Cachy and Bazzite, you can see straight away there's a massive difference. The Bazzite version is unplayable, and the Cachy version is playable. I'm going to say it's not unplayable. That's a bit like a misnomer to me. Anyway, I'm babbling on. So they are both running the same versions of Proton GE. I am not sure why what else there would be the difference. Same Proton GE, same NVIDIA drivers. I even tried a couple of different versions of the NVIDIA drivers, but it still was the same result. So that is a big win here for CachyOS. Now to the last can benchmark, Borderlands 3, running at the same settings, 1080p, 75% resolution scale, and at the very lowest settings. The Bazzite version ran at 42 FPS on average, but this version runs at 46, so it is slightly better, but if you're locking at 30 FPS, you're probably going to have the same experience. So just as a bit of a break, I decided to give my favourite game a test, Super Meat Boy, and this runs perfectly fine. It does have a native Linux build, and you won't see any problems on a 10-year-old machine. Lonely Mountains Downhill is a game that wouldn't launch on Bazzite, but here on CachyOS it runs beautifully. I've got this on medium settings and it's almost at a locked 60 FPS, so you won't have any trouble playing this game. It's a beautiful game, you should buy it. And also the sequel, Snow Riders. Go buy it now, do it. Strange Antiquities, again, run perfectly fine. I didn't check what the FPS is, but I'm pretty sure the FPS is higher on this, but you're not going to notice any difference on a game like this. Another game that wouldn't launch on Bazzite, this is Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. It runs perfectly fine in CachyOS. I had to drop the settings down to 1368 by 768, otherwise it would overload the VRAM buffer. We've only got 2 GB of VRAM on this GPU, so we do have to lower settings. It does run mostly at 60, but on some of the levels it can drop quite severely to in the 30s, which is fine. And after the success of Crash Bandicoot on Lonely Mountains, I decided to try Dead Island 2, which after a lot of crashing, freezing, I eventually got working, and here it is at lowest settings at 720p. And while it doesn't look great, I am surprised it works at all. We are mostly getting around 30 FPS. In heavy fights, it can drop into the 20s. I mean, I'm not actually going to be playing this game on this, but the fact that it works at all on a 10-year-old computer running under Linux via Proton is pretty much damn amazing, and it is a great game. I did attempt running this via FSR, but every time I enabled it, it would either completely crash the system or the frame rate would tank to less than 10 FPS. I just believe that because we've only got 2 GB of VRAM in this thing, it just isn't enough for FSR to be able to run. So that took a long time, so I'm going to leave it there for now. If you do want me to test other distros, then please do let me know in the comments which you would like me to test. But for now, I'm happy to stick with CachyOS. Out of the box, it works amazing on this 10-year-old machine. Bazzite, on the other hand, really struggled with this machine, and that's not to say Bazzite is bad. I've had Bazzite on my deck, and I really love it. I think it's a great distro, but it did struggle on this machine with the legacy NVIDIA drivers, which are known to be a pain in the ass. And at the end of the day, this is more or less just a museum piece now. It is here running my background. I do use it for some light gaming. The only issues I had with CachyOS were that when I originally installed the OS, my Wi-Fi drivers just completely disappeared. I had to plug it in wired, and then I updated and they still weren't recognised, but eventually somehow they just magically appeared. And also with this machine in particular, the Alienware Alpha, whenever it goes into sleep mode, it's just impossible to turn back on. So it doesn't respond to the power button on the front, doesn't respond to keyboard, doesn't respond to mouse, nothing. And that is not the fault of CachyOS, because in every distro I've tried so far, that includes Bazzite and Nobara, I can never say that one. And in the past I've tried Fedora, none of them work with the sleep function. Maybe I need to go into the BIOS and change the power state from S5 to S4, I don't know. Maybe I'll try that another day. But just turn it off, basically, turn off sleep and you'll be fine. So, if you want to see more, I have got another computer that I want to try this on, which is a Intel i7-7700, which again is not compatible with Windows 11. So I will be upgrading that at some point. So if you want to see that, I will show you that. And maybe at some point I will finally move my main rig. Even though it is compatible with Windows 11, I am just fed up, like everyone else, with the Windows ecosystem. I'm fed up of all the telemetry, I'm fed up of all the adverts. I just want a nice Linux machine that I run myself. At the end of the day, I use Linux all the time. I've got it on my server, my pie hole. So it is about time that I just got rid of Windows completely. I am waffling on as usual, but I am finally glad that the Linux Steam machine dream is finally here. 10 years later, it is finally here. I now have my dream PC, and you know, for a 10-year-old machine, it copes really well, even with some demanding games. I'm not going to be playing them like that, but you know, it's just a nice showpiece to show people that this machine, as small as it is and as old it is, it can still run some of the latest games, which is great. And I am going to shut up now, and you know, I think that's it. That's it. I'm going. Yeah, I'm gone. Gone. Laters.